Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game. Today I got a super fun, super exciting, and a little bit confusing video for you guys today, because over the last week I've been absolutely bombarded with messages on Discord and Twitter and even on other platforms asking about a supposed patent for PlayStation 6 being 100% backwards compatible with every single PlayStation console that ever came before it. I did some research, I looked into this, and we're going to talk about exactly what this rumor is, why sometimes you can't trust rumors, and why sourcing information and understanding where the information comes from is usually the best way to say whether or not something might be plausible. But it would be amazing if PlayStation 6 would run every single PlayStation game from 1 to 5, and of course 6 as well, but we're going to have to look into it a little bit deeper. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor down below, hit like and subscribe and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. If you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, got a Patreon link down below as well. But it is definitely going to be an interesting video, and it's definitely going to have a lot of research inside of it. So if we actually take a look at where this rumor originated, it's been on Instagram, it's been on Twitter, it's been on Reddit, and basically the gist of the rumor is that the PlayStation 6 will have full backwards compatibility from PlayStation 1 to PlayStation 5, but that it will be done in hardware, not software. And that was the first thing that really piqued my interest when they were talking about this quote-unquote rumor, that it's going to be hardware level support and not via software emulation or any cloud-based gaming. And I would certainly love to see these games not running on the cloud because I do not care what they say. It is never a stable experience all the time, and I really want things executing locally on hardware, whether it's software emulation or whether it's something like FPGA. It's one of those things that just gives you a much better experience. And that's coming from someone who lives in a major city, and I have 1.5 gigabit internet here, so I definitely don't have a bandwidth issue, but honestly cloud gaming and streaming has never worked for me to an acceptable way, so hardware level support inside the console is a very interesting idea in the first place. Because what this rumor is saying, this isn't going to be software emulation for PlayStation 1, 2, or 3. Now, of course, PlayStation 4, 5, and presumably 6, even though the specs haven't been announced, are all AMD based, and they should just be able to work interchangeably. I would highly expect PlayStation 6 to be able to run PlayStation 5 and 4 games no issues. But just yesterday, I did a video on PS3 getting some big updates, and honestly, PlayStation 3 emulation is leaps and bounds beyond where it was even a year ago. Now, imagine if Sony put their engineers on making a full PlayStation 3 emulator as well. That would be the logical way to go with this thing, because when they say this is all done in hardware without software emulation, that just honestly, as a rumor, doesn't line up with any sort of technological specs we have right now. Now, don't get me wrong, again, I want the PlayStation 6, whatever it may be, to be able to play everything, because just recently I did an ultimate retro gaming setup, and I'm currently moving, breaking this all down, although today was supposed to be closing day, but I had to get moved to Wednesday because one of the sellers of our house fell and broke his hip on Friday, and they've now delayed things. I swear these things just happen to me all the time, but we're just going to have to wait to Wednesday to move this entire setup. But the idea that I could put my PlayStation 5 in a box along with my PlayStation 4, 3, 2, and 1 and just have one console hooked up to the television getting the best of everything, that's definitely the dream, because PlayStation has a long and storied history, and this is definitely something people want, the one box to rule them all that isn't made by Microsoft, where you can just put in any game from any generation into a disk drive and just go from there. Although I'm assuming a disk drive on PlayStation 6 will definitely be an optional accessory, because Sony definitely wants to get us off physical media. But here's the thing about patents, they're easy to find and easy to research. If you just go on and try to find things, it should not be that hard to locate them. And this website right here talks about perfect backwards compatibility and how it's going to be done in hardware and not via software emulation. While this little flowchart here makes sense if you just look at it from base value, I will tell you right now, I cannot find this patent anywhere. Anywhere I would look for patents, I can't find anything where Sony and Mark Cerny are trying to say that in hardware they figured out a way to run native code without having those actual chips inside of the machine. And the reality of the situation is, as far as hardware and how it works, PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, and PlayStation 3 are completely different architecturally than PlayStation 4, 5, and 6. The reason that PlayStation can now be backwards compatible easily is there's way more of a PC in a box using AMD parts than it is a custom bespoke piece of hardware. And again, they basically just say it's going to analyze the native performance of that hardware and then basically change its performance. Now that could be done in software emulation. It happens all the time because obviously when we're emulating PlayStation 1, 2, or 3 on processors that go above 5 GHz, that is not the native speed at which those processors for PlayStation 1, 2, or 3 would have actually been running. So when they talk about doing this natively in hardware, the one thing that does come to mind is an FPGA chip inside of a PlayStation 6. But let me tell you something right now. The type of FPGA chip that could actually run a PlayStation 3 core would be an extremely expensive part, even at the economy of scale that somebody like Sony will be able to get. And I really don't think they're going to put their engineers to work making a PlayStation 3 core, a PlayStation 2 core, and a PlayStation 1 core. Because the reality of the situation is, if they even wanted to go this way and hire somebody who had already made a core, the only thing that exists is PlayStation 1. And those cores really don't have much expanded capabilities on top of what the PlayStation 1 era graphics could do, where something like DuckStation will absolutely just make PlayStation 1 and 2 look so much better. So that's kind of the thing. When this rumor says native hardware support, it would have to have something like an FPGA chip in it, or it'd have to have additional silicon that basically was working to be a PlayStation 1, 2, or 3. You can't just say, we're going to take an AMD APU and we're going to make it run like a cell processor from the PlayStation 3. That's not how instruction sets and silicon works. And that's why when I first saw this rumor, I was thinking to myself, they must just be saying that they're doing it all in software emulation and not just cloud gaming. But then every single rumor indicates that they're doing it in hardware without any software emulation. And that's when my bullshit radar just basically started pinging very heavily. Because I don't think this rumor is true whatsoever, even if a lot of people are asking about it. Because this is run about on the PlayStation 1 running in DuckStation, and sure, it doesn't look like a PlayStation 2 game, but it looks a hell of a lot better than it would on real hardware. This is what game players want, honestly. They want improvements. There's something like Ridge Racer here in DuckStation as well. This is how people remember the games running, but not exactly how they actually run. This is what I think PlayStation and Sony would target if they actually had a PlayStation 6 that would play PlayStation 1 and 2 games, major enhancements to make them about as close to approximately what you think they looked like back in the day as they possibly could. And the reality is there's going to be a very slim consumer set that actually wants to run PlayStation 1, 2, 3 on a PlayStation 6, and the people that did would definitely want graphical improvements. But the way to tell about a rumor as far as whether or not it could have any sort of validity to it is to see where it's sourced from. I cannot find a single site that I would actually trust as far as rumors are concerned reporting this whatsoever. So if you see it on Twitter, if you see it on Instagram, if you see it on a random website, you have to think to yourself, is that website something that I would trust whatsoever? Because nobody else is talking about this. And honestly, I wasn't even going to make a video, but I had a ton of questions about it, and I wanted to talk about software emulation versus FPGA versus how these things are done in hardware. Because again, there is no way to just take an AMD chip and quote-unquote make it a cell processor. It would have to be emulation unless AMD has some new technology where they're going to put like 4 different CPUs on one die. And I do not think Sony would spend the money on that whatsoever if it was even technically possible. Because again, that just increases the part cost. And right now, pricing across basically all components outside of CPUs is absolutely disgusting out there with all the cost of hard drive and especially the cost of RAM right now. I don't think Sony is going to be designing a system that has a ton of extra hardware in it for a limited use case when all the hardware they're going to have to make is just stupid expensive right now. And as far as the quote-unquote rumor that Intel and AMD competed for PlayStation 6 and AMD won, I'm sure AMD won. One, Sony has a relationship with them, and they're going to get preferential treatment because they've been filling AMD's bank accounts for 2 console generations now, and I'm sure AMD would bend over backwards to make them happy for PlayStation 6. Additionally, it's a very easy way to make sure those PlayStation 4 and 5 games run on PlayStation 6, and because Sony is just very familiar with the architecture at this point in time. But as far as the rumor of some sort of hardware solution to run every single PlayStation game from PlayStation 1 all the way to PlayStation 5 is concerned, 4 and 5 would be free because it's AMD. 1, 2, and 3 just make no sense whatsoever because there really isn't any hardware that can become a PlayStation 1, 2, or 3 unless it's an FPGA chip, and again, the type of FPGA chip that would be big and fast enough to actually have a PlayStation 3 and even a PlayStation 2 core would just not be feasible from a consumer price point index. If Sony actually did that, you'd be talking probably about a $2,000 PlayStation 6, and I don't think in this economy anyone's going to be spending that money. So as far as this rumor is concerned, this happens every single console generation. Suddenly that consoles are going to play every single game from that maker from start to finish, and the reality is that just doesn't happen. Now I wouldn't be surprised if Sony does something like make PlayStation 1, 2, and 3 games playable via emulation, but my guess would be, at best we're going to get something like PlayStation 1, 2, and 3 discs working on PlayStation 6 via emulation that Sony engineers developed themselves, and at worst you're going to see some select titles added to an online store. You're going to have to buy them again, and they will run on your PlayStation 6. Now, I would love to see a world in which every PlayStation disc ever made can be put into a PlayStation 6 and at least emulated, but we're just going to have to wait and see. But as far as this rumor is concerned, I cannot track down a single valid source. None of the technological information checks out as to how the technology actually works, and this one honestly just basically seems like a non-starter. I hope I'm wrong, but again, I don't think I am this time. Leave me your comments down below, and I'll see you next time though. Bye bye.